It's 11 from 11 against the Lions. The Swans scrapped their way to their 7th win of the season, finishing in the top 4 for the first time since round 23, 2016. Adelaide got thumped. Geelong crawled across the line while Richmond struggles away from the MCG of becoming a problem. This is a Swans Blog's SwansCast, the #1 Sydney Swans fan podcast. In this week's episode, we'll review the Swans' dogged 18-point win against the Lions on Saturday afternoon. We'll give you our Monday champions and villains, discuss Hewett's excellent performance, give a quick wrap of the Swans NEAFL result, and have Stephen answer questions in our 3-minute scramble. I'm Justin Mitchell, and with me is SwansCast regular Stephen Park. It wasn't pretty, Stephen, but we got there in the end.
You're exactly right, Justin. I was a bit worried actually in the last quarter because I thought we could have struggled, but as the Swans tend to do, they got over the top and they just cruised on by.
Oh, they did. And the Lions, they really went hard in that last quarter. They dominated the inside 50s to the point where they actually had plus 10, I think, at about the 12-minute mark.
Plus 10?
Yeah, they were well out in front, and their pressure was pretty immense in that forward half.
Yes, it was pretty good, wasn't it? I really liked it. I really liked our backline this week, though. I thought they really played well.
Yeah, they've seemed to just get better every week. I'm not quite sure if we need to go tall again with the way they're playing. It's just been very impressive. Rampy's taken the #1 forward now, even though he's giving away a massive amount of height and weight and reach and everything. He's just doing such a good job. And Grundy's basically playing the role of almost the third tall.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's playing more of a quarterback role where he actually just feeds off the play and gets the intercept marks, which was what Mills had been doing for quite some time, and Rampy for that matter. So yeah. I think we're actually quite well set up. How do you think Harrison Marsh went?
Answer this, Stephen. Would you have looked at Grundy and gone, yeah, he can use the ball?
No, I wouldn't have. I would have said, yeah, get him to hand pass it off. But now, not so sure.
I know, he's been superb. He kind of reminded me a bit like, a few years ago, a bit like Leo Barry. He could do some really good stuff, but then he'd go on a bit of a harebrained run and you'd be like, just get the ball off. And then he's been superb lately, he really has.
But in saying that, if you actually look at his stats, he actually has one of our best kicking efficiencies across his entire career. Yeah. He's always been pretty high, but this season he's averaging about 90%, which is just phenomenal. That is really top of the list of elite as far as kicking goes across the league. Yeah, that's exactly right, and he's showing it, and he's making the right choices. That's the difference. Yeah, he is. Now, look, top of the agenda for this week's show, Stephen, is the fact that the Swans, they finally finished inside the top 4 for the first time since round 23, 2016. It has been a pretty dry spell, considering that the Swans actually lost their first 6 matches last season, and there were only 3 from the first 10, but then went on, they won. I think it was, they lost 2 at the end of the season, so I think they won like 12 and 14 in the second half of the season. So they did a really good job in the end. Yeah, they certainly did, and that's an amazing situation to actually finish top 4 around about halfway through the season. Let's hope we can continue to win and cement a top 4 position would be quite good. Absolutely agree, and it has been a bit of a weird season, really. Geelong has been up and down. Adelaide's copped a couple of bruising losses. Port Adelaide looked so good so early, and now they just look absolutely average. West Coast is 9-1, and we're the only team to beat them. And Richmond just seemed to not be able to play away from home at all. So I actually had to go digging through the history books on this one, Stephen. When do you think was the last time there was a bigger streak than, was it 33 games that Sydney finished outside the top 4? I don't know, Justin, but I'm sure you're about to tell me. Well, I put it up on Twitter and I put it up on Facebook, and a few people guessed. Unfortunately, they kind of guessed the wrong era. We're getting some guesses from the 1930s and 40s, which is kind of true, but it didn't have to go that far back. We actually had to go between round 4, 2001 to round 1, 2003. And the thing about round 1 through to round 22 of 2003 was we were in the top 4 for almost the entire season. Yes, we would have been around about that time, wouldn't we? So that would have been an outstanding effort because we would have got in early and just kept on going. Yeah, we did. We were first for a bunch of rounds early in the season, and we just maintained it throughout the season. So I don't think we dropped out of the top 8 at all that year.
Now, I'm not saying this year's going to be like that. It's round 10, not round 1, but it is great to finally be back in the top 4.
Yeah, it's very rare that we've actually done it. In saying that, we do love to be up there, and we do have a good chance of finishing in that top 4 at the end of the year, providing we continue to play well.
Yeah, agreed, 100% agreed. And the Herald Scum obviously have said there's only 3 possible winning teams in it, and it's Melbourne, Richmond, and West Coast. And of course, Sydney, who's 4th, is not included in any of those. So I'm pretty happy for the Swans to get back under the radar.
Melbourne, Richmond, and West Coast.
Yep.
Well, that's interesting considering West Coast haven't really beaten anyone in Melbourne, and Richmond hasn't played anyone. So I find that really interesting.
All of Richmond's easy games are basically away, and they're still losing them. I mean, they played West Coast at home, but they should be winning some of the games that they're playing away.
Yep, that's exactly right. And how has Melbourne now become a flag favourite? Because it was only 3 or 4 weeks ago, people were saying they weren't living up to their potential when they were gone. So I just don't get it.
They're almost talking about maybe they should bottom out and rebuild again. It was, look, week to week is a long time in football. It is just absolutely crazy at the moment. But yeah, when you give Adelaide an absolute hiding like that, I think it makes people pay attention a bit more than they should.
Yeah, but they've got to actually remember that Adelaide is also carrying half their senior list of injuries.
Yeah, they are, but at the same time, you can't really put in a performance like that. And we're not going to go into Adelaide now because we're actually going to talk about them a little bit later on. But I am going to kick straight on into Monday's Moment of Madness, Stephen. Can you take a guess what my Moment of Madness will be?
Something to do with the 40 games?
No, but the league that they run in. So my Moment of Madness is a bit of a swipe at the AFL in general. Look, fixturing-wise, a lot of teams have been bent out of shape this season. The Swans only got one SCG afternoon game, which really upset a lot of supporters in Sydney because they do play a number of afternoon games away from home. Brisbane, for example, I think there's been at least another 1 or 2 that they've played earlier in their season, and they're still due to play more. But the fixturing for Sydney is just all about prime time, not for the home crowd. Carlton has, I think, 6 or 7 primetime games throughout the season, and they have been utterly dreadful for most of it. They put up a bit of a fight against Geelong, but, I mean, let's face it, Geelong pretty much fell asleep after they kicked the first 4 goals, and they really should just blast them out of the water. There's clear Victorian bias in the league. The MCG contract up until 2050-odd is just one example of that. Plus, the fact that the headquarters are still in Melbourne, most of the decisions being made out of Melbourne, and most of the decisions are being made to favour Melbourne clubs, then the goal review system, it is just an absolute shambles. It's been a hot topic for ours for over a season, and Steve Hocking has twice had very public swipes at it, Stephen. Did you happen to catch his latest attack on the goal review system?
I heard a brief thing that was on the radio as I was driving back home tonight, but I didn't really get much of it. What actually happened? What was he saying?
Yeah, so I can't remember who actually had a shot at goal, but one of the Richmond players had a shot at goal, and it was kind of looked like it was touched or marked on the line. It went up for a goal review, and then the goal review said it was touched. So Herald Sun did a bit of an article about it, a very biased and objective piece, or non-objective rather, very subjective and biased as they usually do, using colourful language and very sarcastic tone, which kind of makes it hard to read, but essentially the quotes from Steve Hocking are as follows. We have been very clear with the goal umpires, whatever their position is, unless it's overwhelmingly obvious, we don't change it. That's the decision. And we have communicated that to the score reviewers, and clearly we need to continue to do that. The angle everyone has seen is different to the one that is used for the review. That is the one we need to sort out. When you're looking at what you've seen, that is a different angle. We'll clear that up during the week. Now, essentially, the AFL has a mandate, which I don't think has been made clear, that any goal review is actually made from the furthest away camera angle, because the one at the goal line has a fisheye lens, and apparently it can distort the view of the ball, despite in the Richmond St Kilda case, the ball looking like it was about 4 or 5 inches over the line.
Yeah, it looked terrible. I actually saw the vision of that, and I thought, my God, that is definitely a goal. But if that's the case, if the fisheye lens does actually distort it, it could possibly have been. Yeah, that's exactly right. Why are they using it, Justin? If they are going to distort the play, why do it?
I don't know. Surely they can use cross-angle cameras and set up some form of Hawkeye or something like that to just track the ball. It can't be that hard. I mean, they do it in cricket.
Yeah, well, they have the line break on tennis, don't they? So they've got they can tell you that. They can actually map that down right down to the, what is it, a millimetre or a millimetre and a half from where the ball actually hits?
About 99% certainty, pretty much.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, in tennis, the ball is going at over 200 kilometres an hour a lot of the time. So I don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. So look, I think there's certainly some room for improvement as far as the AFL is concerned. But look, let's not dwell too much on the review system. It's a joke. We talk about it every second week. And it's going to get another foot in the arse by the sound of it from the AFL. So, Stephen, do you have a Monday champion?
I do. And it's one that our listeners are probably not going to be too happy about. But my Monday champion is actually the Essendon Football Club.
Oh, yeah, I could see why they might not be too supportive of this. Why are they your Monday champion?
Well, I just look at it and they were in a situation where 2 weeks ago, everyone was calling for Woosh's head. Everyone was calling for Brendan Goddard's head. Everyone was calling for half of the Essendon team's head. They got beat by Carlton 2 weeks ago. And now, over the last 2 weeks, they've turned it around and they are actually playing the football that everyone expected them to be playing at the beginning of the season. What happened for the first 8 rounds, I do not know. But now they actually look like a football team. And I would actually be scared to be playing them currently.
Yeah, they gave Geelong a lesson, that's for sure. And they are certainly looking a lot better than they did a fortnight ago when they played that absolutely dreadful match against Carlton. So they have turned it around. I'm sure that Swan supporters might have said, what about George Hewett? You didn't like his effort?
I thought George Hewett's effort was quite good, but I didn't rate him like the coaches did and give him 6 points. But in saying that, Dane Zorko was kept pretty well. He was held pretty well. So
look, he started just giving away free kicks in the end. And for those who may not have read them yet or heard about them yet, coaches' votes: 10 Dane Beams, 6 George Hewett, 4 Mitch Robinson. He only got 4 because he ran around like a hoodless chicken for most of it. 3 Darcy Gardner, 3 Stephen Martin, 2 Josh Kennedy, 1 Harris Andrews, and 1 Zach Jones. So Dane Rampy didn't even get a look in, despite the fact he absolutely cleaned up in defence.
Yeah, I actually thought Mitch Robinson played a better game than George Hewett, in my opinion. I thought Mitch Robinson played really, really well. That's probably one of his better games I've seen him play in a while.
Yeah, he brought the fire and physicality to it, and he was winning a lot of hard ball and a lot of clearances. He absolutely dominated in that area, but he just struggled, I think, for the way he used it. Just a bit average. But
that's always been Mitch Robinson's issue. But anyway, speaking of our main man got slaughtered on the weekend, I'm afraid to say. Big Sinclair.
Yeah, he did, didn't he?
His first bad game.
Yeah, it's always due. And Stephen Martin is definitely one of the premier rucks in the league. We talked about this on Thursday, and we actually discussed this matchup specifically. I do recall we both agreed that he was probably going to be beaten on the day. It was just what he could do around the ground.
Yeah, and the issue is Stephen Martin is very good around the ground as well, so it makes it even harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Stephen, I do have a Monday champion, and it's one of our Swans' own. It is a young man by the name of Oliver Florent. Now, he didn't have a massive match compared to some of the other players, but his form is absolutely phenomenal compared to what he was producing last year. Last year, it was a bit like, well, you could see there was a bit of ability, a bit of talent, but he just lacked that physical edge to be able to compete in the matches and stay in the matches. Now he doesn't lack that at all. He's getting in there, tackling, running, bursting through packs, breaking the lines. He's just been absolutely terrific.
I agree. He has been our shining light. I would actually say, out of all the players that have come in this year, I would actually say he's been our best. I know we all look at Ronk and we go, yep, Ronk's done this, Ronk's done that. But he's done it once. Ollie Florent is actually just playing consistent football, and he had the most metres gained in that match.
Oh, he was phenomenal, really, he was. Almost 700 metres gained is just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, he's going to be someone to watch. He could end up replacing Callum Mills for the rest of this season.
Yeah, that kind of player. Yeah, I agree. He's definitely got a lot of talent, and I'm glad he's coming through with it. Now, Stephen, do you have a Monday villain?
I do have a Monday villain, and it is Jack Darling from the West Coast Eagles.
Now, you're going to have to explain this one.
The reason Jack Darling is my Monday villain is because he actually made James Sicily look good on the weekend, and I'm bloody pissed off. I cannot stand James Sicily. And Jack Darling didn't score a goal. He was hardly got a possession for the entire game. Sicily just blanketed him and gave it to him all game.
Good on him.
And then now Sicily's come out and just been cocky and arrogant about it.
Yeah, look, Jack Darling, he's got a bit of a reputation for going to water when the heat's on. So, look, I'm not that surprised that they put the homework into him and a lot of hard work into him on the ground.
That's exactly right.
Now,
and
my villain.
Do you have a Monday villain?
I do have a Monday villain, Stephen, and my villain is pretty villainy. It's a combination of two things, actually. It is the combined efforts of Adelaide and the Western Bulldogs. And in my mind, yes, Adelaide have injuries and Western Bulldogs have injuries, but their performances and efforts were just absolutely dreadful. It was some of the worst I've actually seen in a very long time. And that is even taking into consideration Carlton, who have been dreadful for years. Adelaide simply didn't turn up at all in their match. They were gone in the first 5-10 minutes. It was almost like watching the 2007 Grand Final all over again. It was, no. They were non-competitive the entire game. Western Bulldogs, on the other hand, they were actually quite good in the first quarter and a half. They let Collingwood get back into them, into the match, and Collingwood were always threatening to stay, pretty close. And then after half-time, they scored 4 points in the second half, which is their worst half of football in over 50 years. So they not only dropped the winning position, they just caved like no other team I've ever seen before.
I agree. And that's not just this week for the Western Bulldogs. That was last week as well.
Yeah, 2 weeks in a row, they've been absolutely dreadful.
And I actually have some stats for you, Justin, around Adelaide's performance, if you'd like to hear them.
I'd love to hear them.
Well, I have this. So the 91 points is Adelaide's 14th largest ever loss in their career.
Wow.
Only 5 of them have been after 2000.
Oh, wow. Yep.
And the last one where they actually got beat by 90 points or more was back in 2011. And that was when Neil Craig was coaching.
Oh, yeah. Back in the good old Neil Craig days, right before he got fired.
That's exactly right, when they lost by 103, 96 and 95 in 3 consecutive weeks.
He actually got fired on the back of those matches, didn't he?
He did.
So, I don't think the current coach is in that kind of hot water, but that was just that's their second absolutely dreadful performance of the season. The Collingwood one was just as bad. They just, as a team, they switch on and switch off together. It's quite unbelievable, really. Yeah,
and we saw it in the grand final last year, didn't we?
Yeah, they showed up for the first quarter and then just didn't for the next 3, unfortunately, and we had to suffer through Richmond winning it. But at least Richmond were graceful in victory. Got to give them that. Unlike the Western Bulldogs. The pricks.
Yeah, well, that's right. I agree with that.
Yeah, I can suffer Richmond winning one. I can't suffer bloody Western Bulldogs winning another game in their life.
No, I can't stand the Bulldogs.
But look, before we get too off topic and to Bulldog bashing focus, let's go through our question for our listeners and responses to that one, Stephen. So today we asked, is it time to give the goal review system the boot? And we got some good responses from our crowd. Eddie from Facebook, he said, yes, we should get rid of them. Ron from Facebook, how many years did we survive without them? 100 or so. It holds up the game. Bo from Facebook, I think it's time to upgrade the cameras. Until they scrap it, you pay goal umpires for a reason. Yes, every now and then there's going to be a stuff up, but it's better than holding up the play for 5 minutes. Absolutely spot on there. Janice from Facebook, yes, most definitely waste of time and mostly the wrong decision. That's a very good point. John from Facebook, yes, they are just as bad as the umpires destroying a great game. Yeah, that's true. Adrian from Facebook, better off with them than without them in my opinion. The game is too big to have an obvious human error cost a team a win. The best example of that would actually be Geelong and Collingwood Grand Final, the Tom Hawkins one that hit the post and was called a goal.
That's right, I remember that one.
Yeah, and then there was also the one where I think in another game he actually kicked a straight through the points and they called it a goal. I think in one of the finals as well when it was a clear point. James from Facebook, the way the AFL wants to eliminate errors, we can't give it the boot and go backwards. But surely if we can send a robot to Mars, we should be able to see if a ball crossed the line or not.
That's right, that's true. Comes back to the tennis.
Yeah, exactly. They can do it in the tennis, they can do it in the cricket, and they can do it in the soccer. They should be able to do it in the football. And Danny from Facebook, time for the AFL to let the public see the footage the reviewer looks at, and absolutely 100% agree. As we said before, the AFL actually reviews different footage. So, yeah, it's a bit of an interesting situation, really.
What I can't understand, Justin, is why can't they actually have, like they do in the tennis, there's actually a laser light that goes round the centre courts. Why couldn't they do that between the goals? And then actually have a beam, but then you can't see it, but when they actually tell, and then they can tell where the ball actually is and where the player actually is in response to where the line is.
Because the players would interfere with the line, so it's not like a one object going through the line kind of thing. There has been discussions about putting technology and gizmos in the balls to be able to track the actual position on a field to a very high degree of accuracy and things like that. Really, it's just got to start with better camera work and having fixed cameras at every ground at the same position, really. And they, for a game that gets more than $1 billion in telecast rights, they can't be just using Channel 7's bloody SD cameras to do this job. It's just not good enough.
No, that's exactly right. And the fact that we're getting upscaled SD footage is just not up to it. It's not up to it in today's footy.
No, not even close. Makes me pine for the Channel 10 days, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, it's time to move on to our weekend review. So, Swans obviously got the job done, 18 points. It was 2-6 to 2-1 in the last quarter, and the Lions had most of the play for about the first 15 minutes, but they just couldn't capitalise. They scored one goal. Sydney got a goal. Then I believe they got another goal to bring it back to 14 points. No, 20 points or something like that. And then Jack got that 50-metre conversion. Which
was very lucky because they were on a bit of a run there.
Yeah, it was a bit contentious. I could certainly agree that it was a contentious 50, but it was there. The player gave the ball to the wrong player, so the players just have to be more aware of the situation. As far as stats go, the Lions really did have the advantage throughout the match. They had 12 more clearances. The centre clearances were even, but they just picked it up around the ground. They had 5 more inside 50s, but the Swans won the contested possessions, and the Lions absolutely dominated tackles. They had 22 more tackles. Stephen, what did you make of the match?
I thought it was a good match. I didn't think that we played very well, but the one that I would like to ask you, Justin, if you know, is what was the uncontested possessions? Do you know that one?
Do not know off the top of my head. I did actually write these stats down before, and that was the one that I didn't write down. I think we might have actually had that. I can certainly have a look at that while you're discussing another topic.
No, that's fine. I was just curious because I would have thought that possibly we did get up on top of that, but that's okay. I thought Robinson and Beams were easily their best for the Lions. I would have said that probably Ollie Florent and I don't know who else was really good for us. Probably Jared McVeigh. I thought McVeigh was very, very good out off the back line. I thought his leadership and his actual thinking in tough situations was really good. And I actually say that he's almost on track to get another contract for next year if he wants to continue.
Yeah, if his body can keep up, there is no reason why he shouldn't get another contract, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that he's lost some penetration in his kicking.
Yep.
But I think his understanding of the play and the way he leads the back line, and actually he went in hard. Like, he was actually going really hard, which I haven't seen him do for a while.
Yeah, his form is actually the best it's been in about 3-4 year seasons, to be honest. Last week he actually had best stats since basically the middle of 2016. And his form at the moment is probably as good as it's been since about 2014, 2015, to be honest. Just that consistency. He has been absolutely fantastic. Now, I did find that uncontested disposal. We did win that by about 20 or so, about 23 or 24. So we got him in the stats, in those possession stats. And
what about poor old Sinclair? His first bad game for the season?
Yeah, he didn't have a flash one, did he? He got well and truly smashed by Stephen Martin. Stephen Martin had 58 hitouts. Well, Sinclair, he kind of had a bit of a Stinclair match. He had 21 hitouts and only 12 disposals, but he wasn't the worst for the Swans, but he, to be honest, he wasn't that far off it.
No, he wasn't. I don't think we actually had a really strong performer in the whole match. Now, tell me something, Justin. What do you reckon's going on with Franklin's kicking?
Maybe it is a heel injury. Maybe he's still a bit limited. That would be my best guess, because he hasn't been able to kick it really any further than 50 metres in the last couple of weeks.
No, and his penetration, it really seems off. Like, he can still pinpoint a target really well, but his actual distance in kicking just seems to have completely dried up over the last few weeks.
Well, I guess it really depends on which foot his injury was on. If it was a right foot injury, then he probably doesn't have the balance to really move his body through the ball. So he's probably just not making contact, strong enough contact.
Yeah, you're probably right. I reckon you're right.
But look, Hewett, he featured in the coaches' votes quite prominently, actually. I believe that was 6. We talked about that before. He did a fantastic job on Zorko, absolutely dominated him. And Zorko started panicking late at the match, and he started to giving away silly free kicks at the packs and contests as well.
He did, didn't he? He really started to get under Zorko's skin, Hewett, and I'm really happy, because I actually think George Hewett had a few lean patches over the last few weeks.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And the interesting thing, this is why I don't like looking at things like Dream Team, Supercoach, and AFL Fantasy, is because if you look at it, you can kind of get a little bit misled by the stats being what the actual fantasy ratings are. And if you have a look at them, you'll see Dane Zorko's got 110, right? And if you have a look at Hewett, he's quite a fair way back at 93. But everyone who watched the match would say that Hewett easily dominated him and was by far the better player out of the two.
Yep. And that's always shown up in the coaches' votes. I always look at that and you go, right, which is the best judge, or not which, who is the best judge of who played well? And I reckon the coaches' votes are easily the best way to tell who's played well on the day. These ones where the media give it, they look at the stats and they go, oh, Dustin Martin's had 41 possessions. Oh, Tom Mitchell's had 41 possessions. It means nothing. George Hewett doesn't have to get a lot of possessions to do his job.
Well, there was that match when Tom Mitchell had, 50 disposals against Collingwood, and they still lost.
Yeah, that's right. And the one, what's his, Jackson, is it McRae from...
Yeah, Jackson McRae, yeah.
Jackson McRae. He had 44 possessions last week, or 43 possessions. He didn't even rank in the coaches' votes.
No, because the Dogs got absolutely flogged, and they're talking about him being a Brownlow favourite. I just don't get that, to be honest. It's I don't believe it. I don't agree with it. No.
You want to know why? Because the umpires go in at the end of the game and they go, right, let's have a look on afl.com.au and look at the stats. Oh, yeah, that's who's got the most possessions. That's who we'll go with.
Yeah, if they're doing that, they're doing a bad job. They're not doing the job the right way, in my opinion.
No. I hope that's not the case, but I just have this feeling that's what they do, because it would be really hard to be an umpire and do the votes as well like that.
Yeah, I would agree. Like some of those votes would be very difficult to actually come up with on Saturday's match, given the conditions. I think reading a lot of commentary, a lot of comments online in the fan base, but also pieces that have been written up in the Age and Herald Sun and other publications and whatnot, and especially AFL. There's actually been quite a bit of criticism about the Swans for the way they performed and the fact that they didn't crush the Lions. But I think that a lot has, I guess, been forgotten or ignored or just overlooked about the conditions and just how poor the conditions were. Yes, it didn't bucket down all match. It wasn't a tsunami, but it was an incredibly slippery game. And players from both teams, they really struggled throughout the game just to have clean possession of the ball.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you've just got to look at it from the perspective that the Swans led for all but a few minutes early in the first quarter. So they had about 95% of the time in the lead. And basically, once you get the lead in those conditions, it's pretty hard to come back because the conditions are really hard. You can't hit targets very cleanly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at one point the scores from set shots were 6-3 to about 3-5 or 3-6. So it was clearly the difference. Both teams basically had the same amount of scores from set shots, and it was one thing that the Lions coach Fagan picked up after the match and said that was one of the main areas of difference. The Lions midfield, I thought, did really well, but Swans defence was just absolutely destroying it throughout the match. They were never really under that much pressure or really challenged, despite the fact that the Lions had a lot of inside 50 and a lot of pressure early in the last quarter, and certainly through different patches throughout the match.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I thought our defence was probably the best game they've actually had in quite a while. Still concerned about dear old Harrison Marsh and whether he actually fits in there. He had a great probably last 10 minutes in the fourth quarter. But other than that, he just looks a bit lost, a bit all at sea, and I don't think he can replace Callum Mills all that easily.
Yeah, look, I did give him a pretty good rating from that match based on how I thought he actually performed, and I thought he did fairly well throughout the match itself. He didn't get a lot of disposals, but he was doing a lot of good defensive work. But basically the way that players like Jones and McVeigh played in defence was absolutely fantastic. Kennedy did the grunt work and he did it really well. Kieran Jack is kind of improving in form a little bit, but at the same time, he does so much good work and then he just turns the ball over by foot. I've never seen anyone work so hard and do so much good work only to screw it up with pretty ordinary disposal.
Yeah, I just don't get it because he's still tackling well, he's still running well, but his disposal, his kicking is shocking.
Oh, it's the worst I've ever seen from him. All he has to do is clean that up, and he's basically like a really, really good B grader, if not bordering an A grader.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, he'd be a strong B grader easily if he could actually get his kicking sorted out. But I do not understand what's happened.
Yeah, I don't know either. At the moment, he's kind of like a bit of a low B grader, almost a C grader. He's kind of getting towards that. He's probably because age, getting towards the end of his career, but he shouldn't be that bad by foot.
No, that's right.
Now, a couple of other things is the fact that the Swans kept on going to Franklin. Franklin was the most targeted forward of the match, despite the fact he only kicked one goal and kicked 2 points, and really had no impact on the match at all. The same, I guess you could say, for the Lions. Their forwards really struggled, especially Hewett. He had almost no impact whatsoever. And McCartan just couldn't get into the game. And the conditions really didn't suit the third gamer, so you can't really pick on him for that. Here's an interesting one for you, Stephen. All of our multiple goal kickers were 22 or younger. Heaney, 22, Ronk, 20, Hayward, 19. And I did have the other one listed, but I think I deleted it.
Yeah, you're right. It was actually a very, very good stat, and that it actually came up in the game that I heard too. So Ronk, Heaney, Hayward, that is... Oh, Papley's the other one?
That's right, yeah.
And they are, our young guns in the forward line are doing very, very well. Particularly Hayward, who's just dominating the forward line.
Yeah, it's... I'm just having a quick look. Yeah, Heaney, Hayward, Ronk... they actually kicked 2. Papley kicked 1. Stoddart kicked 1. Franklin and Jack were the other 2 goal kickers. It's it's really impressive to actually see so many young players stand up. So I'll just quickly pull up the ratings, for example, just to go through the ages. Jack McVeigh, 30 plus. Dan Hanbury, 27, 28. Isaac Heaney, 22. Harry Cunningham, 24, 25. Will Hayward, 19. Zach Jones, 21, 22. Papley, 21, 22. Kennedy, 29, 30. Florent, 19. Jack, 29, 30. Sinclair, 27, 28. Franklin, 30. Rampy, 26. Ronk, 20. Luke Parker, 25, 26. Hewett, 22, I think. McCartan, 18. Harry Marsh, no idea. Riley Stoddard, 18. Heath Grundy, old. Nick Smith, I have got no idea. And he plays like he's about still 18 years old. And Jake Lloyd is, I think, only 22, 23 years old. No, I think he's only 22 years old. He plays like he's almost 300 games in.
Yeah. And Harry Marsh is 25, I think they said.
Yep.
Mm.
Look, I was very happy with the result, despite the fact it was a pretty scrappy and at times messy performance.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. It was. And we got the win. That's all that matters. So anyway, Justin, tell me about the NEAFL. What happened this week?
So the telecast actually came on a lot earlier than originally scheduled. It was supposed to be 12:50. It actually started at like 11 a.m. The Swans had a little bit of a... they came back a little bit early on and they led for most of the match. They held about a 3-goal lead at three-quarter time. Unfortunately, there was no champion data stats for this match. That was something that the broadcaster announced early on, so we don't really have any stats. But they held a 3-goal lead at three-quarter time, and then the sideways rain came, and it turned a decent game into a dreadful game where neither team could really get into a scoring position. Brisbane had their chances and just absolutely shat the bed. They were pretty ordinary in attack, but for the Swans, Newman, Robinson, and Cameron again just absolutely dominated it. Aaliyah playing God knows how many positions. He's all over the place. And Amadi and Rose were among the goals for the Swans, so they did their job and they did it well.
Right, well that's good. I'm glad that Newman, Robinson and Cameron played well again, but I can tell you now, Newman's not going to get a look in.
No, look, we actually do have a question about that, Steve. But I know that there is one other player that people would be interested in knowing about, and that is Gary Rowan. He did not play. He travelled with the senior squad and was an emergency for the seniors.
Yeah, well, I don't agree with that. Why omit the guy and then not play him?
Yeah, it was a very weird situation where Harley's just given him a public whack and then didn't even get a game in the reserves. It was just a bit odd, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And either Tom Harley lied to the public about why he wasn't playing, or there was something going on and they were thinking that someone was going to pull out and they needed another forward. That's the only thing I can put it down to.
Yeah, and that could have been a McCartan. Like they may be deciding on McCartan or Franklin even. Franklin still looks a bit restricted, but look, it's a weird situation, to be honest. If you're going to drop him, force him in the Magoos, take the risk, just make sure you play him. But look, it's time for our 3-minute scramble, Stephen. So are you ready to answer some questions from our listeners?
I am.
All right, so the first one is Chris from Facebook. He asks, what's going on with Aaliyah? Did the coaching staff decide he's not good enough, or will he be given a chance when they think he's ready? I thought he was an easy replacement for Callum Mills.
That's a really interesting question, and I would actually say that I think Aaliyah is in a tricky situation in that he's actually got the size of a key position defender. That's why they play him in the ruck. That's why they play him at centre-half forward. But he doesn't have the strength to play a key position. And when he plays as that Callum Mills style player, he actually has issues because his hand and foot skills are just not up to it. And that's why I think he's actually being thrown around as a different role player. Because if they're going to get him settled, they need to play him either as a centre-half back or as a centre-half forward. Playing him in different positions is never going to get him anywhere.
Yeah, we talked about this on Thursday as well. And I remember specifically talking about Aaliyah and why he didn't get picked. And I said at the time that he basically should have been the like replacement for Mills. He's just unfortunate that he's so tall because he plays like a small. He doesn't play like a tall at all.
That's right.
Now, Stephen from Facebook, Stephen, one of our regulars, he asks, what would you think is a decent trade value for Newman? Or would he be happy for some reason being stuck dominating the NEAFL, which he was doing for a few years before his debut anyway?
Right, well, I actually think the trade value is slowly dropping on Newman because they're not playing him in the seniors. He would still be getting his 25 to 30 possessions in the seniors if he was playing. I actually thought he was the perfect like-for-like replacement for Callum Mills because he uses the ball well, he runs the lines well, he has great decision-making, yet he still didn't get picked. What is he averaging in the reserves? I think 28 or 29 possessions a game. He's averaging a goal a game as well, and he's still not getting picked. There's something going on here. He's gone from being an outright favourite last year and to now, this year, he can't get a game. I would say his trade value is dropping severely.
I think he's a bit of a victim of circumstance as well, because you look at someone like Jared McVeigh, who basically ended 2016. He was looking like he was going to retire. That was his last match, right? So Newman comes in 2017. He has a really good start to the season, and then Jared McVeigh comes back, and he's just basically back to the Jared McVeigh of old. And it's like, well, you can't drop Jared McVeigh. He's one of the best players in defence. Where do you fit Newman? And there really isn't like a natural position to fit him in.
McVeigh and Mills play as the halfback flankers. They've lost one of them. Isn't he the perfect replacement for the Mills?
Sure. I don't know, to be honest. I thought the combination of Marsh, McVeigh, and Jones did pretty well, but maybe that's just because of the conditions. So it's probably going to be a week-to-week prospect.
Yeah, that's true.
Daniel from Facebook, he asks, is it time for a second ruck?
In a simple answer, no. We do not need to be playing a second ruck. Just because Sinclair got beat in one game doesn't mean anything. Basically, you've got Aaron Sandilands and Nat Fyfe playing it for Fremantle. You've got Toby Nankervis and basically whoever they want at Richmond. You've got Jacobs and whoever they want at Adelaide. You've got multiple people at North Melbourne. You don't need a second ruckman these days to actually contest. You need someone who's actually going to give a strong contest and then make sure your midfielders can read the ball well. That's it.
Yeah, agree. And look, the last one, Steve from Twitter. Do you think Hannahs needs a spell in an NEAFL? Maybe the message of being dropped? I just don't think he's giving the same effort as the rest of the team, but great win though.
Simple answer there. Well, actually, before I go on to the simple answer, Stephen, and you got Stephen on the show. That's pretty good. 3 Stephens. I would actually say yes, he probably does need a run in the reserves to actually get his confidence back up and his control. Will it happen? No.
No, I agree. That's pretty much all that really needs.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps us up for the show, Stephen. So, look, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Justin. It's always a pleasure to come on.
And we'll be back with you on Thursday evening along with Heather Quinlan's for our weekend preview podcast. I believe we are playing on Friday this weekend.
We are, against Carlton.
Now, guys, as always, you can follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with the tag, the Swans Blog. And you can always get in contact with us during the week using the hashtags SwansCast for Mondays and SwansCast Extras for our preview podcast on Wednesdays or Thursdays. Until Thursday, go Swans.
Go the Swannies.